Hi, Dr. Marcia Sirota here, and today I want to talk about the number one killer of romantic relationships, and that is fear. Fear is the number one killer of romantic relationships because it makes us do things or not do things that really interfere in the ability to have healthy, positive, long-lasting, loving, connected relationships. So let me talk about the ways that fear can interfere in our emotional relationships, in our romantic, intimate relationships. First of all, when we have fear, we are not often honest with what we feel and what we need. So we won't tell the person if something's bothering us, and we won't tell the other person what we want from them. And so we go along not getting our needs met and being bothered by things that we're not expressing. And of course, that's going to have a problem in the relationship because we can't be intimate if we're not expressing our true needs and feelings. Plus, the other person doesn't really know us because we're not being honest with how we feel and what we want. And that will create a rift between us. So that's one way that fear interferes with the ability to have true intimacy and long-term connections. Another way that fear interferes with our relationships is that we can become very fearful of abandonment, fearful of rejection, fearful of the other person not wanting us anymore. And we can start acting in ways that actually push our partner away, or we can become more clingy. So when we're frightened, when we're fearful of abandonment or rejection, we can go in one of those two directions. So when we become fearful of abandonment, sometimes we have this weird paradoxical reaction where we go, okay, I'm going to push them away before they reject me. I'm going to make them leave before they make me leave. It's not happening on a conscious level, of course. It's an unconscious defense mechanism. But sadly, we can push somebody away out of the fear of abandonment when they have no intention of abandoning us, but it's our fear that's controlling our behavior. Or we can become super clingy and super needy because we're so terrified of them leaving, and that clingy, needy behavior becomes very off-putting, and it might lead to the person walking away because they can't tolerate that kind of smothering. So that's another way that fear interferes with our ability to have a healthy relationship. Another way that fear makes it very difficult to have a close, intimate relationship is if we have fear that the other person won't like us for who we are. We can be afraid that if they see the true self, then they might reject that self. So we put on a facade, we put on a mask, and we pretend to be what we think the other person wants. We do this little song and dance, this little acting, but the true self is hidden behind the facade. And sadly, if the person loves the facade, we, the true self, do not feel loved. And that's a big problem because our facade is being loved, but our true self feels very alone and very lonely and very neglected and very sad and possibly even resentful that they're not getting the love that the facade is getting. And of course, that will make it very difficult to have a long-term healthy relationship because we are not getting the love that we need. You know, the facade is. And also, it takes an enormous amount of work and effort to keep up that facade. So when we're having to do that song and dance, that little act, that facade is exhausting to keep up. We're having to prop it up, and that's not fun. So we're having to waste a lot of energy pretending to be something that we're not out of fear of abandonment or rejection when it doesn't really work for us because the other person isn't loving the true self. So that's another way that fear interferes with the ability for us to have a loving, long-term relationship. And the final way that fear interferes with our ability to have a healthy relationship is the fear of being alone. And so we will please, we will go along with things, we will do things that we might not want, we will compromise our integrity, our values, because we're so terrified of being alone. And so we're not going to be happy in that relationship because we're not being authentic, we're not being genuine, we're acting out of fear of abandonment when we should be acting out of love. You know, I always say that we should always make our decisions out of what we want, not out of what we fear. Because when we make our decisions out of what we fear, we're compromising our true self. Whereas when we make our decisions out of what we want, that's really coming from our true desires, our true self. So we should never live in fear in our relationships and do things that we don't want or avoid things that we do want in order to please the other person and avoid being potentially rejected or abandoned. Because what we need to know is a true relationship is one where we are truly seen for who we are and accepted and loved for exactly who we are. And so if we say, no, I don't want to do this, or I don't like that, or this makes me uncomfortable, or I don't approve of that, or I disagree with that, and the other person has a problem with that, then it shows us that we're not compatible and that we are better not together. Rather than compromising ourselves out of fear of being alone, we should be honest and authentic so that the other person truly knows who we are, and then they can either decide that they want us for who we are or that we're not compatible. So those are the ways that fear can really sabotage a healthy, positive love relationship. And we should understand that all of these fears are not really significant. They're not really important because, being alone is not the end of the world because we're always with ourselves. And if you love yourself, then being alone is a love affair with yourself. And if you love yourself when you're alone, you're going to attract people because people love to be around those who have good self-love. And fear of speaking out and being rejected, well, again, if the person rejects you for who you are, that's just information that they're not right for you. So all of these fears really aren't important and they don't really contribute to anything positive. So it's time to examine your fears if you have any or all of these and work on letting them go so that you can have a healthy, positive relationship that is not fear-based, but is want-based. That you want to be with this person, they want to be with you, and you're both authentic and genuine and truly connected, truly intimate. Intimacy is seeing and being seen, loving and being loved, accepting and being accepted. And there's no fear involved in any of that. I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota with my cats, and I will be speaking to you again very soon.